Hello and welcome back to the Cortright cast. My name is Alex Cortright and I am joined by my brother Jonathan Cortright. And today we are talking about the Suicide Squad trailer that just came out like a day or two ago, I guess, when we're recording this. But just for specification, this is the Suicide Squad,
not to be confused
not
with
Suicide Squad.
Different.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the first interesting points about this whole new era that they're clearly trying to usher in with the Suicide Squad, because it's pretty common knowledge that Suicide Squad 1, directed by David Ayer, was not very good.
Dumpster fire.
Dumpster fire would be
nice.
That would be a very nice way of putting it. But that's a widely known thing.
And also, no, Idris Elba was not the recasting of Deadshot. He's a new character.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
Yeah. You thought they recast him?
Yeah, I just saw it and I was like, oh, I guess they got rid of Will Smith.
Yeah, it's just really interesting because before we even get into the trailer, the branding around it, it's so clear that they're trying to like wash away the previous film, because in the trailer there's pretty much no mention of the previous film either. Yeah. There's no like implication. There's clearly a lot different focuses, a lot different. I mean, they've got the same Suicide Squad vibe that obviously is like the aesthetic that they're going to go for with the property. And then I think the biggest tell is the Suicide Squad being the title, not Suicide Squad 2, not Suicide Squad with,
this is
a name
Suicide
after
Squad.
It's like the Suicide Squad, which makes it feel like it's strange because it makes it feel like it's a reboot, not a sequel, but it's not a reboot.
What's kind of interesting
it's
is like
forget about the
little
past
sort of circle that this project has gone in, where a very clear inspiration for the first Suicide Squad was Guardians of the Galaxy, the James Gunn movie, and Suicide Squad was just like almost like a Hot Topic version of Guardians of the Galaxy. God, and just horrific.
Too on the nose, a Hot Topic version of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, and just ultimately horrific in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
And now we've got James Gunn doing basically
a Hot Topic version of Suicide Squad.
Hot Topic
of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Version of Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's him doing it now.
Yeah. So how do you rip yourself off?
Yeah, it's like David Ayer was probably not the guy to do a James Gunn-esque movie.
Yeah.
James Gunn's probably the guy to do a James Gunn-esque movie. That being said, he's also dipping into the Hot Topic aspect of it. So yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of an interesting loop that went in.
It's just strange the way that, I mean, the new Batman movie is called The Batman, but it's a reboot. So I get why they're trying, you have to, when you're doing a reboot, same thing with like Spider-Man. The Amazing Spider-Man, there's so many different, there's only so many different ways you can brand a superhero movie as like the main title. And so I understand if they were rebooting Suicide Squad 15 years later, calling it The Suicide Squad, and us being like, okay, but going from Suicide Squad to The Suicide Squad.
Chances are people who aren't paying attention and see multiple cast members from the first movie are gonna think it's a direct sequel.
Yeah, which is what I'm assuming it is. It's just strange. It's so blatantly obvious that the studio is like, we need to pretend like that last movie didn't happen.
DC seems to be going like the X-Men route in terms of continuity, in that they don't care whatsoever.
Yeah, we'll just time loop anything that we need to.
It seems like they're caring even less than X-Men, where this doesn't even seem. I mean, we can't tell because it's not out yet, but it doesn't really seem like they want to even pretend that this is in the same universe as
this one is clearly in the same universe, but they're
kind of pretending that everything that happened didn't happen.
Yeah, we're just moving on.
Yeah. But in a way where it kind of feels like it is a totally different universe with just a few of the same cast members.
Yeah, and it's this kind of the same situation with X-Men too, because X-Men didn't exactly do that, playing with their time and not really worrying about continuity. It wasn't really a plan. It was kind of we don't really know what to do type of thing. Yeah. And no one really liked the last thing we did.
We just want to see Hugh Jackman in the Michael Fassbender, James McAvoy movies.
Yeah.
That was really the drive
but
behind that.
Like all the time jumping and all that stuff, they really just found a way to make that work. It didn't really feel
they didn't. They just did it.
Yeah.
They didn't find a way to make that work.
They didn't make it work. They just kind of said it worked and moved on. But with here, I mean, clearly, let's assume that it's obviously in the same universe. It's a direct sequel. That I'm assuming they're probably not going to do much mentioning of the last film. But going into the trailer itself, I did think it was interesting. You can only go up from the original Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
So good for them. Good job,
assuming
James Gunn.
they don't
You've
get
clearly done better than Suicide Squad 1.
I mean, all you'd have to do better than Suicide Squad 1 is just not get the same editor.
Yeah.
And your movie is about
it doesn't take much to
10
do better.
million miles better.
Yeah. But I do think that there are a couple of things in this trailer that I would highlight that I do find to be just better direction in general. And that's the thing about James Gunn is that I do, David Ayer was a relatively acclaimed director before Suicide Squad. Mm-hmm. But then he went on to direct Bright, right? Yeah, Bright, the Will Smith movie, the Netflix film that was supposed to be like some gigantic blockbuster hit that was one of the most laughably bad movies of the year when it came out. And so I don't really know what to think of David Ayer at that point.
Well, also a lot was made about like the Ayer cut of Suicide Squad.
I'm done with these cuts.
The thing about it is that like rarely, very rarely, is a movie recut into something far, far worse than the original. The editing of Suicide Squad was some of the worst film editing I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Ever. Like in all aspects. Scene to scene, shot to shot. Awful. But there's enough of what Ayer clearly meant in there to tell you that the original version wasn't good to begin with.
Yeah.
It may have been better.
The editing was awful, but there was nothing on screen that was driving me to want to watch the movie or be interested in the movie or think the movie was good to begin with. Like it wasn't, you can see some movies and be like, oh, the editing. I mean, take like Bohemian Rhapsody. The editing on that film was truly awful.
Yeah.
But there still was a film underneath it. There were actors doing great things. There were good aesthetics. There was a story underneath it. Whereas like with Suicide Squad, it was like, yes, the editing is awful, but like, are we missing something? Like, is the editing actually keeping us from seeing a good part of a movie? No.
I feel like it just would have been coherently bad. Kind of like the Snyder cut.
Yeah. So when it comes to the actual trailer, it is interesting some of the directions they're going in because James Gunn being I wouldn't say a more competent director, but clearly going to attempt to make a more competent cut of a movie.
I think he's more suited for this type of material and what they want.
The movie does look more coherent and more cohesive across the board, just on the trailer alone. Now, the trailer is not super promising. It honestly still looks like a knockoff James Gunn movie. I will say, just pros before we get into, the more broader subjects surrounding it. I liked the kind of focus that they seem to bring in the trailer. And maybe the movie isn't like this, but it seemed like, on the original Suicide Squad and everything DC's done that involves Harley Quinn, they've tried to slap Harley Quinn on it as like the only thing that matters. Mm-hmm. And that hasn't worked for them. It felt like they were doing more of a team up movie in this film than a Harley Quinn movie. Mm-hmm. Whereas Suicide Squad seemed like it was just like, hey guys, we have Harley Quinn. So I do like the fact that Harley Quinn had her place and she did have her kind of showstopper type of clips in the trailer. But it clearly seemed like more of a team up movie. Like there was more emphasis on the cast and the film itself and the tone. It really emphasized tone, which was what Guardians of the Galaxy did well too, because Guardians of the Galaxy had such an emphasis on tone. Now I do have conflicting ideas about whether or not I like this, because at what point, like, is James Gunn Guardians of the Galaxy, or like, can he transplant Guardians of the Galaxy onto a new film and it be good? Because I don't really know that I want to see Guardians of the Galaxy just planted into another property.
I feel like with, aside from the fact that it is a team up of lesser known comic book heroes or villains, this is borrowing far more from Deadpool than it is from Guardians of the Galaxy. It's just James Gunn's visual style that is going to...
It's just got that tone. The whole trailer, it has that James Gunn tone, which is, I guess, it's also hard because James Gunn is so known for Guardians of the Galaxy, so we think more Guardians than James Gunn. Yeah. So it is really hard to differentiate. So I won't put that against it, but the trailer doesn't slap like Guardians of the Galaxy did. The Guardians of the Galaxy original trailers were like, whoa, this movie looks exciting. I'm excited for this. Whereas this one feels like they're like trying to make something out of nothing. It doesn't
feel as much like a ripoff. It doesn't feel as much like rip off Guardians of the Galaxy as it does like when a movie's really popular, you see like 10 movies that are very similar come out after it, but seem hollow in comparison. This feels like a trailer for one of those movies. Yeah, it just happens to be directed by the guy who did the one that it definitely doesn't
feel like it has the content behind it just based on the trailer. Yeah. even with the flashy trailer. I mean, the trailer is cohesive, though. It is a relatively interesting trailer. I thought they did a good job of hitting on the things that people were going to want to see. Yeah. Like, from the view of a massive comic book fan, you know, I'm not in love with the Suicide Squad in general, or, you know, like a super, like, into the comic books and lore type of person to begin with. So I'm giving a more general take. I can see how this trailer would appeal to the more hardcore fans in a certain way, and I appreciate that. I liked the actual emphasis that the trailer seemed to put on Joel Kinnaman's character coming more to the forefront. One of the first things I noticed was I like Joel Kinnaman as an actor. I don't know if he has insane chops yet, but I really enjoy the things that he's in, and I want to see him succeed. I liked how in the original Suicide Squad, I felt like he was a sideline character that was playing some kind of like just gruff, you know, bodyguard, military type of character. And it came off really flat. I felt like his performance was really flat in the original Suicide Squad. Is that a? Yeah.
Well, I also think that they reshot him to be more prominent in the movie than he even originally was
in the original Suicide Squad.
I want to say because they linked there was that like weird romance between him and the villain.
Yeah, I can see that.
That was both shoehorned and cut off and dropped and brought back.
Yeah. You're right.
That movie's so chopped up. Yeah. You don't really know what was intended to be there originally or not.
But. Yeah. So, but what I do like is that in this trailer, his character seems like more of a character with some life and some personality behind it, as opposed to the kind of just blocky, like I am a soldier who is a stand-in for a serious character type of thing that he did in the original movie.
He and Amanda Waller are like the two bridges between the original and this one. Even though like Harley Quinn's obviously in it.
Yeah.
She, even though like Margot Robbie's playing her the same way, she's clearly a different Harley Quinn than she's probably more Birds of Prey Harley Quinn than she was Suicide Squad Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
So it almost feels like a soft reboot of that character, despite being in the same universe and same cast. So I really feel like him and Amanda Waller are like the two actual bridges between the original movie and this one. That being said, I liked Idris Elba in the trailer.
Yeah,
I like him in everything.
I like him in everything. I liked the tone and the character that he seemed to be putting on. You didn't get a lot of him, but you got a little bit. And every time he came on in the trailer, he kind of stole the scene.
I actually like Harley Quinn's bits better. Normally, I find her kind of annoying.
Yeah, she's just a little too much.
Yeah, I actually thought that some of the stuff was pretty funny.
It was clean. It wasn't over the top great a lot of times, but a lot of the trailer base like concepts were clean. It looked like a solid movie.
Yeah.
Just from the trailer. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't amazing looking. It didn't give me like a ton of hope or make me dying to go out in the theaters to see it, but it did make me like, okay, I see where this is going. I like the casting. I like Idris Elba in general. I even like the John Cena. I like the idea that they're going for there. I'm interested to see how they pull that off. Was it Sylvester Stallone?
Yeah.
Playing King Shark. I think that's his name.
I think so. Yeah. That was when it was like, okay, we're going full James Gunn.
Yeah. That's why I was towards the end. I was just like, at the end of the trailer, it was interesting. I liked the red band trailer aspect of it, how they're starting to lean into it. Yeah, like you said, clearly more of a Deadpool kind of inspiration there. Yeah. But I mean, blending that kind of Guardians and Deadpool vibe is not the worst idea. I don't really know where else you take the aesthetic for this film. So I don't put that as a knock to it, the kind of derivative nature of it. I don't like the kind of Hot Topic vibes from it, the property in general, but I feel like that just kind of comes with it, especially once you've chosen this direction for Suicide Squad. I mean, they can't deviate but so much.
I think they should have deviated more. I think that's one of the things that is disappointing about the trailer is that I wish it was more of a reboot than it seems to be.
I feel like it's going to be hard for them to deviate on anything DC related, just in general, though, right now, because DC is in such a save our franchises mode that they're going for the safest things possible.
Well, they're in such a wacky spot where it's like, I mean, Shazam was a massive deviation.
Yeah,
that's like the one DC film that I've enjoyed the most, even though I still think it's a highly flawed movie in terms of enjoyment. That's been the most enjoyable one.
It had the problem with a lot of the DC stuff that's coming out
that all the previous DC stuff was lacking.
Yeah, that's the
not
main
that it needed
thing
to be light and funny.
Yeah,
not that the previous DC stuff needed to be light and funny, but that Shazam. It wasn't just that Shazam was light and funny; it's that it was charming and campy in a sincere way.
Yeah,
not in a pandering way.
There's nothing sincere about Aquaman. There's nothing sincere about Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
I think there's an argument to be made for Wonder Woman, the original Wonder Woman.
I think the first Wonder Woman had that same sincerity.
Yeah. And that was why we liked it, because it was a highly flawed movie too, but I enjoyed the original Wonder Woman.
And they can do the grim and gritty DC stuff if it has the sincerity behind it.
Yeah.
Whereas it seems more that they're obsessed with that aesthetic rather than obsessed with that as a storytelling standpoint.
Yeah.
It's really the Snyder foundation of being obsessed with the aesthetic.
Yeah. And it's hard because when you go so hard on the aesthetic, it's okay to lean in with the heart and especially the concepts behind your story and those attitudes, but without branching into a Snyder Cut Justice League or any Justice League type of critique. One of the things that I noticed, which I think is common throughout a lot of the DC stuff, was that they in the Justice League, they always try and lean into like these little gritty ideologies, and like they try and give you little pontification dialogue bits where someone's just kind of talking about the world and how hard it is, or the world's this way or that way, and they try and give you like some random philosophy speech. And it's always so hollow, like everything that they did in Batman v Superman with Lex Luthor was so hollow. It always sounds like the ramblings of like a 15-year-old who's like a rebellious 15-year-old. And I don't like it. Like, I don't mind leaning into those gritty aspects and those gritty ideologies or philosophical overhangings around these films. But I don't feel like they have the people that they're getting to come up with them and insert them into the films and really build stories around them do not have the chops to handle it.
The films have to be strong enough on their own for any philosophical question to elevate it. And they're not strong enough.
Yeah.
Like nobody ever saw a movie and was just like, that movie is terrible. But the themes really made it good.
Yeah.
Nobody ever said that. If a movie's bad, then they go, oh, the themes like were nauseating. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that didn't come off right. That felt pretentious.
Yeah.
If the movie's good enough, it doesn't feel pretentious.
And that's the problem.
But instead,
with everything
you've got,
DC's been doing.
A clear obsession with, Superman being a Christ figure. So you're going to have this constant imagery of him, like, with his arms stretched out, and it just feels.
I hate that.
No, and it could work, and that's not that. It wasn't Snyder's idea to make him a Christ figure. He was obviously always an analogy for that. But it's the constant imagery of that on top of a not very good movie makes it feel overly pretentious in a way that it wouldn't if the movie was really strong underneath. It would feel like it was elevated by the themes and by the symbols. But instead it feels like these symbols and themes are being thrown in your face and the movie's not there.
Mm-hmm. And now switching back to the Suicide Squad IP, when you're talking about themes and elements like that, I mean, there's doesn't seem to be anything like that. No serious tone, no heavy themes, or any real questions to be asked or explored in a film like this. And that's fine. If it's going to be a fun film is the idea here. But I mean, I'm interested to see where they go because the trailer itself didn't really give much story. It was very much like, here are some characters that we hope you will like. We've made it aesthetically pleasing. We've made it look like a James Gunn film. And it's flashy. It's got some edgy jokes. It's a red band. It's clearly rated R type of idea.
I think the threat needs to be small. I think the threat has to be small. One of the big things that they messed up in the first Suicide Squad was like the pitch of the movie is quite possibly the dumbest pitch I've ever heard in my life, which is like, what if Superman, the strongest being on Earth, like ripped the roof off the White House and stole the president? Who would stop him? Oh, okay, a drunk Australian with a boomerang, a crazy girl with a bat, a guy who's good with guns, and a dude who shoots fire. Oh yeah, and a guy who's part reptile. That's like, that is the worst pitch. Yeah. You just go, oh, that sounds like a terrible idea. They would all die. And so like putting together a Suicide Squad to do like more grounded Black Ops missions, like heist style missions.
Yeah.
Would be way more fun, way more believable. It could be slick and fun and cool, like a team up movie. But instead, the first one had them fight like a godlike being that they created. It was like they messed up big time on that. Yeah. So I hope that in this one they scale it back and make it more of a grounded take on it, because I don't think the Suicide Squad needs to be like fighting some giant alien being shoots a sky beam up. Like, that's not the type of team that they are. But
I 100% agree with that. And I mean, so I mean, on one hand, it's really hard for me to judge things like these trailers or DC things because I'm constantly struggling with how to view them, and that where do I give them leeway? Where do my low expectations make the things that are decent about the films or the trailers or whatever's coming out elevate them? And should I be more harsh on them? Because quite frankly, I watched the trailer and I went, that actually doesn't look that bad. That looks decent. I'd watch that. But then on the flip side, I can also look at the trailer and go, oh no, that still looks pretty bad.
I'm just not, I don't know. I'm just not excited for them.
It's hard. I don't really get excited for any superhero films these days. And I think that's just superhero fatigue that I've had for like 6 years now.
Yeah.
Like I struggle to get excited for, especially when DC keeps failing us.
The last like 5 years for them have just been damage control. Like literally since BVS came out, it's been damage control. Yeah. And one of the first bits of damage control was to completely recut Suicide Squad. And it feels like I remember when the trailers for Shazam came out, it felt like damage control. It's like, okay, they're doing the lighthearted one.
And I just don't know that damage control is the way to go in general. I mean, when you have the disaster that Batman v Superman was, I think that just making a better film to come after it was really all you could do. But we just need these franchises or the studio or just even the films into good hands. And I think James Gunn was a decent option to start doing that, but they should have started doing it all the way back after Batman v Superman, whereas recutting Suicide Squad, Shazam being relatively sincere and fun, but still not a great movie. Aquaman was kind of a joke. Wonder Woman had some good bits. It was an enjoyable film. It did really well. Still had a lot of problems. Wonder Woman 2 is one of the worst films I've ever seen in my entire life. Like there's no consistency here.
Yeah. Well, I think their foundational mistake was just centering things around Snyder, because the reason that train took off and then derailed was because he had like a 5-movie plan and he made it 2.5 movies in, and then they were like, all right, we need a major course correction. So it left like half your movie feeling like the Snyderverse, or half your movies feeling like this Snyderverse, and then the rest of it they were like, all right, what do we need to do to correct this? Suicide Squad was still founded on the idea of it being in a sort of Snyderverse. It still has those like almost Zack Snyder elements to it. Whereas Wonder Woman didn't at all. Yeah. And very much felt like its own thing, but also sort of fit into the universe. Like that was pretty successful in how they did that. Wonder Woman 2 did not feel like it fit into the universe whatsoever. So it's like they really just didn't have a solid plan to begin with. They built it around the wrong foundation. And now they're like, it feels like they're chasing trends.
Going back to the sort of Snyderverse though, I mean, because I think with DC, I really don't want Marvel. I have no need for a James Gunn styled film in the DC universe, frankly. Yeah. Like we have that. We have all of that with Marvel. They do it the best. They have that entire genre, that entire market just totally locked down. Yeah. So the fact that when Snyder got a hold of these properties, he was doing his own thing and it was very much a Snyder thing. I don't dislike that. It's that Snyder needs just solid direction. He needs better writers under him or a better producer keeping him in check. I don't have a problem with the Snyder aesthetic. I like that on the DC properties. It's the fact that they can't get it right. And instead of working to get it right, they just said, no, we're just gone in general. We're going to say, screw it and run and chase after Marvel. Mm. But then halfway through, they're like, but also we're going to pay millions of dollars to release a Snyder cut of Justice League. And because that's the other thing. I mean, if you want to talk about chasing after Marvel, I think the Justice League was the Joss Whedon Justice League was the exact thing that we knew would have happened if they tried to Marvel everything. Mm. Because they literally went and got the Avengers director to direct the Justice League. And I get it. He didn't direct it from the ground up. So I'm sure he could have made a better film on his own. But that being said, it did not work at all. There was nothing about the original Justice League that worked on any level. So they tried Marvel carbon copy, didn't work at all. They tried letting Snyder do his own thing, and it kind of failed. And instead of trying to fix what was broken, they just tried to completely turn around and go in a different direction. And so now they're just lost. They're just wandering around in the wilderness, throwing things at the wall. So on one hand, you have this Wonder Woman. That was kind of decent. Aquaman. What a joke. Like Justice League, but edited and directed by the Avengers director. But now we're going to recut it to make it super dark and gritty, just like, the original Zack Snyder's vision. He finished the film. Yay, Zack Snyder. Okay. It's still nothing about any of the things that are going on in this universe are working. I mean, even if you have a decent film here and there and some decent ideas here and there and something to work with, so far, nothing about this cohesive universe has worked.
Yeah.
None of it clicks together.
I think just from the ground up, they have a creative team that never quite understood what to do with the characters. I think, from Snyder's, just specifically focusing on Snyder, I think that he doesn't really like Superman that much, or just the core character of Superman that much, and very much had a mentality of I want to make him what would be cool to a 15-year-old who thinks Superman's lame. So let me strip him of almost everything that makes him actually Superman and make him really depressed looking, really mopey, and definitely got to desaturate all those colors because we don't want him looking. Well,
Snyder's always it's weird because I like Snyder's some of his directions visually, but also with the way that he's handled some superheroes in the past. That being said, he's kind of, especially to Superman, he brings that kind of old school mentality of superheroes have to be made to be cool, whereas Marvel leaned into the kind of yes, we're flying around in capes type of thing, and it's fun.
Well, I think in his head he thinks that he wants to make a Batman movie, but I actually think he understands Superman more than he understands Batman as a character. I think he just likes the aesthetic of Batman. I think Batman has the dark, gritty aesthetic that he wants to play with and tries to superimpose on Superman, but not one scene that he's ever directed with Batman or put together with Batman has convinced me that he has any understanding of Batman as a character or how to make him work in a film. Superman, on the other hand, I think he, in many areas, stripped him of what he should have had and stripped him of what he should have been. But in certain scenes, he actually nails Superman. And the first scene of Superman flying in Man of Steel is great. There's a couple scenes where Henry Cavill really gets to show off that he actually is perfectly cast for that role. And then the rest of the movie he has to gaze off depressingly at nothing. It's Henry Cavill is so full of Superman charisma. And Zack Snyder's just nope, you got to keep that in, man.
Yeah.
Definitely don't show any of that off.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, even watching, I know Superman doesn't get a ton of screen time or personality. I mean, in both Justice League, the original Justice League or the Snyder Cut, or even in really Batman v Superman. But
I think Spider-Man in Civil War had more lines than Batman did, or than Superman did in BVS.
Yeah. But that being said, I mean, specifically after having watched the Snyder Cut, I love Henry Cavill so much. He just does nothing in those films.
Yeah. I actually felt this is the one thing that I will probably get murdered for saying, but Joss Whedon actually understands what people like about Superman, and the reshot scenes, as awful as the CGI mustache thing was, the reshot scenes with Superman, they were over the top, they were super campy and comic booky, but they were it was cool to see Superman actually act like Superman.
I remember walking out of Justice League thinking that movie was a train wreck, the original Joss Whedon Justice League. But I remember you and I talked about, we were but Superman really felt like Superman in that movie.
Yeah.
There was something about it, and that doesn't mean it was perfect, but something about even in the end, his action bits, his lines, his aesthetic, the shots, shot for shot, we were just that was I felt like they captured the essence of Superman.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it was perfect. Doesn't mean that everything was cohesive by any means, but there was a little bit of something there. And we specifically talked about how Joss Whedon seemed to have a better idea of what Superman was than Snyder.
And I think
that's on display after you watch the Snyder Cut.
Yeah, I think
Superman literally just looks kind of mopey and weird. And he honestly looks like a robot in a lot of it. He literally looks I'm they superimposed his face onto everything else CGI, because there are times when he's flying around and turns his head and he looks like this. He looks like a robot.
I feel like Zack Snyder could make a good Superman movie. As much as I don't think Man of Steel works as a whole, there's like sparks that do work in there. I feel like he's like fighting against making a Superman movie though. It's like he doesn't want to. It's like he thinks that it's not cool. It's like if he would just bring what he brings to it and capture the essence of the character as he has in very small bits of that movie, then I think it would work. But it often feels like he's fighting against himself in making Superman. He's like, I really want to be making Batman.
Don't you think that could be said for the entire, like, just to wrap up the DC conversation, that they're fighting against themselves? Like, there are sparks here and there, but nothing cohesive. Nothing actually comes together. And then they won't stick with anything to work out the kinks. They won't stick with something to really make it work. They just kind of, as soon as something seems like it might be sketchy, like people might not like it might get criticized in some way, they're like, oh, we got to go run this other way. And I get it. I mean, these are massive studios that want money.
Marvel set a precedent that no movie can be unsuccessful for your universe to work. Like, Marvel is the only cinematic universe so far that has actually worked. Like, just generally agreed on it's worked. Financially, it has absolutely worked. But Marvel set a precedent that you can't really have a failure because they haven't really had a failure. So if you look at the template for cinematic universes, it's literally just success after success after success after success. It's not, oh, Marvel stumbled a little bit and then took off.
Yeah.
It was like they took off and they have been rolling. The Dark Universe, the Mummy movie, failed instantly. Amazing Spider-Man failed pretty much instantly. You know, all these universes have like just failed right off the bat. And I feel like DC, as soon as they hit like a little bump in the road, just go like, all right, we're resetting the course.
Yeah.
Reset the course. Because Marvel I think they're looking for that formula that they can replicate every movie.
Yeah.
Whereas if they hit a bump in the road, they're going to go, nope, course correction.
I understand that there's a lot of money involved, and that's what they want. Like, they're at some point they have to be like, we just need to make money. Because in the end, if you don't make money, you can't make anything. So I do even understand that corporate aspect of things. However, I think the problem was, instead of saying, Marvel defined the cinematic universe. But what I think a lot of people have missed is that Marvel defined their cinematic universe. They didn't define how to do a cinematic universe, if that makes sense. The best thing that DC could have done was go as far away from Marvel as possible. Because trying to emulate Marvel in any way, shape, or form was not going to work. They didn't have the time and they didn't have the resources. I mean, and then it showed, because they tried to toss 5 movies together into like 1.5, and it fell apart. I mean, Marvel took like 6 movies just to get to the first climax of the first act. Yeah. And that time was what worked. And I'm not even saying, I mean, obviously DC could have done better if they had taken their time and really built out these characters. I mean, we didn't even get a Flash or Cyborg anything pretty much until we see them in Justice League. And that is what's on display. One of the worst elements of the Justice League, Joss Whedon or Snyder, is that they're trying to stuff character introductions and arcs into a film that's about a team up, and you don't have time. You cannot handle true arcs on characters that you're introducing for the first time, dropping us into the middle of their story and get us to care. Yeah. And it's like, I would have rather seen DC build, I mean, almost like anthology-like universe, or where we're really exploring. I would have rather seen DC go down the route of following some of their more unknown characters. I mean, obviously we want Batman, we want Superman, things like that. But I mean,
the issue from the start, or really every issue with the DC universe, can be traced back to Batman versus Superman as a movie. Like how it set up things, you can't undo that, because that movie set up so much, and the way that it set it up was so bad. And you can't undo the setup. All they could do was pretend it didn't happen or follow through on a badly set up idea. But I mean, Batman versus Superman went like, all right, how about if your introduction to most of these characters is us just combining 2 of the most popular Batman and Superman comics ever, which is the death of Superman and Dark Knight Returns. 2 comics that were the end of long runs. You didn't have that long run up until the iconic moment. Snyder went straight for the iconic moment before you knew who these characters were. Yeah. But also altered these characters enough to where you can't rely on prior knowledge. So it's like, it was just a really poorly constructed universe from the start. And they've sort of just been like trying to course correct while trying to pretend like it didn't happen, while also trying to finish off what was set up. And I think they probably should have just hit the reboot button at some point and just like maybe kept the cast that they could keep, but just pretend that it didn't happen.
I think it should just step away and make good films.
I think step away, make the Batman. You know, I wasn't blown away by Joker, but make stuff like that.
Yeah.
Keep giving people opportunities to do that.
Yeah. And then you can find a way to bring them together after you've got successful
Imagine
things.
if you have like these solo movies. Like I really miss the superhero solo movie. I mean like the true solo movie that has no setup for future movies, that has no true linkage to any other universe. But imagine if like you had these sort of parallel anthology stories where, you know, Superman could be mentioned or show up in a Batman movie, or Batman could show up in a Superman movie, and it could basically be like the cartoons. Instead of having it,
so you could build towards something bigger,
and everything doesn't have to be the end of the world. Like every movie doesn't have to have a giant sky beam and some godlike villain that they have to fight. Like, sorry, nothing's interesting about Steppenwolf and nothing's interesting about Darkseid. Like the only thing that's supposed to be interesting about Darkseid is the fact that he's like DC's Thanos. It's like, oh look, he's big and evil and he destroys universes. Cool. He looks kind of cool. It's like that's it. Like, that's not interesting at all. So it's like they DC's sitting on a gold mine of characters. I really wish they'd do something with Green Lantern. I don't feel like they ever are going to.
Do you like the random aside note, the Snyder Cut dropping in like little Green Lantern?
No, it just gets like murdered.
Yeah, just a random Green. Yeah, Green
not
Lantern
even
gets murdered.
not even Green Lantern. Literally just an alien who is a Green Lantern.
Yeah, but it was clearly supposed to be like this big nod.
Yeah,
and it was just like I don't know, but yeah, it's. I mean, I think in the end though, it's for me, it's just about time. Like they need to spend time building things, and they're trying to be like, well, if we just drop a big budget onto a movie, then we'll have built what Marvel built. Whereas Marvel built something that came from the ground up. I mean, obviously they had a big behemoth behind them to start with. I mean, obviously when you talk about the studio, but they still started small. They still took their time and laid groundwork. There is no groundwork under the DC franchise right now.
They didn't knock it out of the park from the get-go. Like Iron Man's a really good movie. For the most part. I challenge anybody to remember anything that happens after the second act of that movie, though. I guarantee you can't. Because that movie's just, after that, it's not very memorable. Robert Downey Jr., it was his like huge comeback. He was great in it. It was great for its time. It's still good, but it's not amazing. Iron Man 2 is a complete mess.
Yeah.
Thor's decent. The first Captain America's pretty good. You know, they're solid. Nobody remembers that Hulk movie, the Edward Norton one.
Yeah.
Those are the first four. Then Avengers. Really, it was Avengers that like took everything, took the world by storm.
Mm-hmm.
Those first like four or five movies, they range from meh to pretty good. You know?
Yeah.
So it wasn't like they just came out of the gate and were just like, we're hitting it with the best stuff.
But one of the things that was present in all of those movies, aside from the Edward Norton, I mean, we pretend that one just didn't happen, the Hulk movie, but what was present in all those movies was there was a charm to all of them.
Yeah.
Iron Man 2 was a mess of a movie, but we still went to see Tony Stark, played by Robert Downey Jr. I mean, Thor, the first Thor was such a snooze fest. I mean, like, but
I like it more than most people, but
I still kind of enjoyed it though. Yeah. I mean, but it still felt like Marvel. It still had the same attitude, the same tone.
And even the first Captain America, much like the first Iron Man, I mean, after the second act, it just kind of falls off. But it really captured the heart of Captain America, and it made people like Captain America. Like nobody who cared about Captain America prior to that.
Yeah.
But people liked it, and it captured the sincerity and the heart of that character. I think Superman and Captain America are similar characters, and it's amazing to see how Marvel made that character work and made people like widely like him, whereas they still can't figure out how to make people like Superman.
Yeah.
But yeah, they started with a foundation of just solid movies, and even the Avengers. That movie, I think is in retrospect highly overrated. I think it's a good movie, and I think for what it was able to accomplish in 2012, it was amazing, and it was the big party that they deserved for making that work. but it's like the middle stretch of that movie's really, really slow. Like that movie's not the like perfect team up movie. So it's like Marvel made these things work without just killing it all the time.
Yeah.
They sort of just stuck with their direction. And went, like, this
they
is
made
what
it
we're
work
doing.
by honing what they did best. And if you look at it,
it does help that
look
it
at
was,
what they do now.
they were widely well received because they didn't have the whole like, oh, we got to do a course correction.
Yeah.
Mentality.
But if you look at what they do now, what they do in every movie, which has become the Marvel shtick, that's just almost a little over the top now, that was what they were honing this whole time.
Yeah.
The tone of that Iron Man, the snarky, the fun, the comic booky, don't take yourself too seriously vibe was not slapping you in the face of the first few movies. It slowly built. It built into the Avengers, and then it continued. And if you look at it now, that's one of the few. I mean, there's a lot of tent poles of a Marvel movie now. But in terms of like just broad general tone and feelings that you get a same feeling from every Marvel movie. And you can criticize that or love it. And some people really love it. Some people don't like it as much. That's, your own opinion. But what they did was they honed something. There's nothing consistent about the DC universe except for that it is not working right now. And I think that's pretty much, the end of the line. Like, I don't know how much more patience. I mean, I'll continue to watch, I'll check out Suicide Squad, I guess, but I don't know that I have much more patience for this whole DC universe. And it's hard because I really just want it to work. They always give me one thing or I'm like, well, maybe they'll figure it out. Maybe it'll get better. Maybe there's something to this, but nothing is working so far.
I'm excited for the Batman.
So that is probably the one spark of hope that I feel like I have, but I don't feel like that has much to do with DC to begin with.
No, it doesn't. And that's what I'm excited for.
Yeah. So, I'm excited for that movie, but in terms of just the broader cinematic universe, I feel like I'm at my, I don't have patience for it anymore. Like I said, we've seen this trailer. I'll be interested to see if it's considerably better. I'm assuming it'll be better just right off the bat from the original Suicide Squad, but the Suicide Squad, James Gunn's version or sequel, it'll be better, but I think it'll be just, the question is how much better. Will it just be a little bit? Because a little bit's not going to cut it. It needs to be a strong movie.
I think it instantly is going to be significantly better because if they had just played a black screen for 2 hours, that would have been a little bit better than Suicide Squad.
I want to push back, but you're right.
That movie is like torture for the eyes.
Yeah, you're right. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it does when it comes out. I think that wraps up. We've gone way over our time. That wraps up pretty much everything I have to say about DC for a while. So thank you guys for watching. Drop a comment if you have any agreements or disagreements with any of the things we've said in this podcast. Start the discussion in the comments below. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever your podcast provider is, and we will talk to you guys in the next episode.